All right, the recording has started. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Kelly Landacre with Midwest Urban Strategies, and I'm glad that you carved out the time to be here with us today. Before we get started, I'd love to get a sense of who's in the room. So, if you could, you're already starting to do that, go ahead and drop your name, your organization, and your location if possible, so that we can know who we're talking to today. And as we go along today, and you think of questions, and I'm sure there'll be quite a few. So make sure that you put your questions in the chat, and we'll be monitoring those chats to make sure that we get all of your questions. And at the end, we'll have plenty of time to dig into your questions. So let's get going. This is about grants, right? Winning the grant. It feels great. And you get all excited, maybe even some celebration. And then about 5 minutes later, reality sets in and you think, can we actually do this? Are we set up to stay compliant? Do we have the right people in place? And usually it's not one of those questions, it's all of those questions. So today's session is about what happens after the award, when things get real, when we're going to talk about risk, capacity, implementation, and oversight in a way that actually connects to your day-to-day work that you're doing inside of your organization. Jeremy, if you'd advance the slide, please, we'll take a look at the agenda. Thank you, Jeremy. So we're going to take a look at what Midwest Urban Strategies is all about first. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the current grant landscape, what the feds tend to notice first, how to move from planning to actual implementation, and then how that shows up in oversight and compliance. We have a really strong group of people here with us today, and we are very excited that we are going to be hearing from Tracy Carey, who is the Executive Director of Midwest Urban Strategies. She'll ground us in the MUS perspective and the role we play in the workforce system. We're also joined by Elizabeth Tyson-Jankowski with Andrea Orendoff. She's bringing a really important lens around fiscal oversight and compliance. We'll hear from Paulette Francois from Calco Consulting Group, who will help us think about operationalizing this work and building capacity. And Felicia Fountain, Program and Operations Manager with Calco, who will walk us through what the federal lens actually looks like and what we notice early. So as you can see, you're in really good hands today. So one thing I'd like to say before we get going is now that excuse me, I'm sorry. We want to be thinking about where does this show up for us in our work? How are we already strong? And where do things start to feel a little stretched? So let's think about those things as we launch into this discussion today. But before we do that, let's take a quick pulse check. And we're going to do a little bit of a poll here. And we're going to take a look at where you are at. Let me hit this launch. There we go. So if you would, go ahead and put your answers in there. All right, let's see if we can get some results. And they're not showing. Are you able to see?
Yeah, I see it. Let me help out here, Kelly. So
okay.
It looks like we've got the number one answer is all of the above, all at the same time. It makes me think about that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is exactly what it feels like when you get a new award. There were a handful of people who said, 27% in fact, who said, how do we track and report everything associated with the grant? That is really an important part of the what we need to be thinking about. And then smaller numbers around, do we have the right people? And how do we stand it up quickly? So I think those are all really good responses to the question. And I think, you'll agree that we're going to address a lot of the information about this as we move through the conversation today.
Thank you, Tracy. I had something else pop up. So let's get going then. So with all of that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Carey, the Executive Director of Midwest Urban Strategies. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it. So Kelly did, I don't remember if she actually mentioned, she is the membership director here at Midwest Urban Strategies. We're a membership organization. And so if you're curious about what that means, or how you might join us, you could reach out to Kelly at her email. It's kelly@midwesturbanstrategies.com. It's a mouthful. It's a handful. I know, but it'll be worth the visit, believe me. All right, next slide, please, Jeremy. So today we are going to spend some time, excuse me, together talking about the opportunity in front of us when we are awarded a new grant project with federal or sometimes state resources. Those kinds of grants bring a set of requirements that and rigor that organizations need to be prepared for when they roll up their sleeves to start writing. And that is one of the things that we as a team really reflected on throughout the conversation, that the planning to implement really needs to start well before you put pen to paper to submit a grant application. Nobody puts pen to paper anymore. I just dated myself, but you get the idea here. So Midwest Urban Strategies has been in the space that manages and facilitates grant-funded projects really since its very beginning. We are an intermediary that brings together the workforce development boards, who are the local systems operators who connect all of the parts of that local system to close the gaps for job seekers, workers, and employers. And they help to make sure that our economy keeps rolling in each one of those local areas. Those organizations who run those local systems are our members. And we've been doing this work together since 2014, when the law that governs the public workforce system changed from the Workforce Investment Act to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, or also known as WIOA. So we've been at this for quite some time. Over the time frame of our work together, we have invested in a number of projects and initiatives through the use of federal funds. And so we've learned, sometimes the hard way, through this process, many of the tips and tricks that will be shared with you today as we go through this conversation. I want to just take a little bit of a step back and share a story. When my son, who's 35 now, was growing up, he would speak, and sometimes the grammar that he used was not proper, and I would correct him and ask him to use proper grammar. I'm sure any parent in the room can appreciate that effort that we go through. And he would get so frustrated with me because he felt like he should be able to speak however he wanted to speak. And I would always say, when you can tell me the rule that you just broke, then go ahead and say it however you want to say it. But until you can do that, until you understand what the rules are, you need to just follow the rules. And I think the same can be said around managing these federally funded projects. So I'm not suggesting you should break rules, but what I am saying is that when you understand the rules and how to apply them, it really does open up your aperture to understand the ways in which you can design policies and structure your practices to meet your own needs and interests in the delivery of your services. But you've got to understand how it works in order to do that. So we have a great group of folks here today who are going to talk a little bit more about what that means and how that works. Jeremy, next slide, please. Um, as we move towards that, I do want to just mention again that as a membership organization, we welcome organizations who are focused on the same goals and priorities that Midwest Urban Strategies is focused on. And those are things that help to advance innovation in the public workforce system. And that is the heart and soul of the work that we do here at MUS. And we do that in a variety of ways. We bring people together in formats like this. We call these learning labs. These are opportunities to come together and have a conversation around topics that are important to our industry. And I do mean conversation. So what we're asking for as we go through this process of sharing the information that we have at hand with you, we want you to engage. So if you have questions or you have thoughts or you have particular challenge that you've experienced and you're curious about, please do feel free to put that into the chat. We have folks who are monitoring the chat, and we will make sure that we either answer the question while we're in sort of real time, or we've got plenty of time at the end to have a more robust conversation. So use that chat function. We intend to learn together here. That's what we're all about at Midwest Urban Strategies, is really advancing a learning community around how to do workforce development effectively and advance those best practices in our industry. Next slide, please, Jeremy. So we are existing at a time where our system is sort of facing what I might call an existential threat. There is change afoot. I mentioned that when we were originally organized, it was during the time that the federal law that governs our system was changing. At that time, that felt like an existential threat. It meant change. Of course, that's the one true constant. But at this time, with changes to how the workforce system is perceived, we as individuals who work in this system, who are professionals in our industry, oftentimes feel challenged to meet the moment in front of us. In September, the administration put out a document called the America's Talent Strategy, and it focused on 5 pillars that the Department of Labor and the Trump administration was advancing. And we were excited to see that strategy come out because we know that the public workforce system is actively at work across all 5 of these pillars, doing really innovative work to advance each of these the strategies inside these pillars. And so we organized together to share out some of the stories about how our member communities are engaged in industry-driven strategies, how they're using tools like registered apprenticeship, what they're doing to engage their employers in their local community and integrating with other service systems to ensure that nobody gets left out. There's no wrong door, as we like to say, and really helping workers move into and up that ladder through the resources and supports of the public workforce system. And I would be remiss if I didn't remind us that the system we work inside of through the Department of Labor is called the Employment and Training Administration. It isn't the Training Administration, and it isn't the Employment Administration. It's the Employment and Training Administration. And I really focus on that because we sometimes lean too far towards training, and we forget that sometimes all somebody needs is a little bit of support and guidance and navigation to move from the job that they maybe just lost into the next opportunity that they really need to support their family and strengthen their household. And that is a part of the service strategy that our local workforce boards engage in every single day. Those are the stories that we tell that help to elucidate the impact that folks just like yourselves are having on people's lives each and every day. That work requires that we understand the rules and requirements that drive and come behind our work. And we have to know those, we have to do them consistently and well. And so today is an opportunity to, from probably 5,000 feet, take a look at what some of those priorities are when we're managing projects with federal funds. The team that's assembled here are experts in this space, and we're really grateful that they took their time today to share their knowledge and expertise with us. So without further ado, I am going to get us kicked off with the first person from our team who's going to talk about what the feds notice first. So I'd like to welcome Felicia Fountain to join us now and talk a little bit about this.
Thank you, Tracy, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you. I apologize, my camera is not working. It was just working, then I got kicked out, but we're just gonna roll with this. I did put on lipstick for y'all, so just know that, but we're gonna roll with this. So I'm here and I get to talk about something fun to start. You got the award. That's a huge deal, and it's really important that you take a moment to celebrate that. So woohoo, you got it. But from the federal side, the thinking shifts almost immediately to, can this organization actually deliver? Their focus moves from the idea of the grant to your execution of it. And this is where risk comes in, not as a punishment, but as protection. Federal agencies have two responsibilities. One, protect the funding, and two, to make sure your programs deliver results. The fact that you won the grant tells them that you had a strong plan, but immediately they start looking at, do the systems exist to make that plan real? One of the biggest misconceptions is that the risks begins when you get the award. It doesn't. Risk assessments for the federal government start during their decision-making process of giving it to you. They have already asked themselves and done analysis on whether you've done it before. Do you have the infrastructure to do it effectively? Can you manage federal funds responsibly? That's where things like conditions of awards come in, COAs. Those aren't random. Those are early indicators of where the federal government may already have concern, either about your plan, your grant, or your organization. Those conditions of award mean that when you're getting awarded the grant, you cannot fully effectively execute that grant on day one. There are things that you need to do to come up to par before they will certify that you are able to, go off and do everything. Those conditions of award, they shape for the government how closely they're going to monitor you, what type of additional reporting they might require of you, and what type of technical assistance they will start planning to provide you. So by the time you receive your award, the feds have already assigned a level of risk to your organization. It's best if, everything is in a great place and it's green. They have a red, yellow, green system, right? You'd like it to be green because at least you can start there. But a lot of times you really do have to start at a yellow or a red and pull yourself up out of that if you do not have the proper systems in place once it starts. And the risk doesn't go away after you get the award or after you deal with those conditions of award. Risk isn't one moment, it's continuous, but it just shows up differently depending on where you are in your grant lifecycle. So at startup, it's things like staffing and system setup. During implementation while you're running the grant, it's documentation, service delivery, and your consistency of doing all of that. And then during monitoring, when they come and monitor, whether it's in person or whether it's a desk review, it becomes about alignment. Is what you're doing and the results you're delivering match what you proposed? And here's what I really want you to take away. Most findings from monitoring don't start during monitoring. They start months and months earlier. It's the small things, the little things like hiring delays, weak documentation, unclear or undeveloped, non existent processes. Those things, if they're not addressed immediately, they grow over time and they're caught during that monitoring. Now let's talk about FPOs, your federal program officers, project officers. They do not review everything equally. Let's just put that out there. They don't, they can't. A lot of them are overburdened. They have too many grants that they're trying to manage. Everything isn't equal. But what they are looking for are signals. They're looking for early indicators of whether your grant is on track or at risk. The three areas that I want to highlight that show up consistently are program integrity. So here they're asking, are the participants eligible? Are the services that you described being delivered as described? Fiscal integrity, this is a huge one. Elizabeth will get into this a little bit more later, but are you spending the funds correctly? And are you following rules consistently? Are you following your own procedures and processes internally consistently? And third, systems and data. Are your processes for data collection and data input consistent? And is there documentation where it's supposed to be? If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. And let me just add this. They're looking for compliance, but not just compliance. They are looking for patterns. The patterns tell them about, are the systems strong or are there vulnerabilities? You can have one-offs, but they are looking for patterns. And once they see patterns going in the wrong direction, that's going to put your grant at risk. What are the patterns? Well, across programs, all of the programs, specifically in the Employment and Training Administration, as Tracy pointed out, the same issues show up again and again. And you'll hear these again, probably, from Paulette and Elizabeth when they speak, but it's the same stuff. These issues include eligibility documentation, document, a disconnect between the program and the fiscal side. So this is dealing with people, the disconnect between your program and your fiscal people, a disconnect between your program and your fiscal processes, a disconnect between your program and your fiscal documentation. That's a huge one. Also, procurement challenges. Do you know the rules and are you procuring properly? Did you get 3 bids before you selected? Some of those things. Some of the things, when we get busy, we just do them, but they're really, really important. And then data quality issues. I know that, and feds know, right? There are challenges a lot of the time with data, with their own systems that they're asking for you to put data in, but you got to do the best you can. And so it's one thing to have an issue with the data system, but your data needs to be consistent and it needs to reflect what is actually happening. And I've saved the best for last. Weak internal controls. You must have internal controls. I think Elizabeth will talk to you a little bit more about that later, though. But internal controls. If you start with the right processes in place, you'll probably end better. Let me end here. Let me just say one more thing, Jeremy. When we talk about the issues that I just listed, eligibility, disconnects, procurement, all of that, these issues are generally not about intent. They happen because the systems aren't fully built out, communication breaks down, and processes are not applied consistently. And most of that doesn't show up in big moments. It shows up in your day-to-day operations. Most findings are not caused by bad decisions. They are caused by
I think we lost her, Tracy.
Yeah.
Felicia. I think we might have lost Felicia. So hopefully, I mean, boy, she had us hanging there, didn't she? That I think I know where she was going, that, you know, that the risk that we are facing are, you know, they build on each other. And so it's really important to be always sort of watching our progress and our management to ensure that we don't allow ourselves to get into a situation where we get sort of caught off guard. Go ahead and take us to the next slide, Jeremy, please. So this is our next poll. We're curious about what you guys think in terms of when do things most often start to break down during implementation. Is it a consequence of communication across teams or partners? Do you see it more in participant eligibility and documentation? Have you experienced more with staffing capacity or turnover? Or maybe the ensuring services are provided that remain aligned with the original plan? That's an important one. And then that tracking process of the progress and performance. All of those are really critical parts of the work. And so I'm going to choose one. Let's see. Try to break it down would be, I would say, this one, let's just go with that. Yeah, okay. All right. So Kelly, or I guess I'll kind of report out here. Oh, most of you, a majority of you, Jeremy, can we pull the slideshow back up? Thanks. Oops. Jeremy, can we show the slide deck, please? So most of you say that communication across teams or partners is the biggest place where breakdown happens, and communication is hard. We're going to talk a lot about that as we move into this next part of our conversation, how critical it is to bring the right people into the room and when that should happen. I think, all of these are definite challenges that we need to manage. But that communication, boy, that is really critical. All right. Do we lose Jeremy? Sorry, you guys.
I'm
Doing
just
this
texting
live.
him now.
My screen stopped sharing?
Yes,
There he
it
comes.
did. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
From current, maybe? Yeah.
Didn't know it stopped sharing.
Yeah. From current slide, maybe?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We'll get back there. There we go. Go ahead into Paulette's section next. Just bump it forward. There we go. Don't get dizzy, everybody. All right. So next up, we have Paulette Francois from the Calco Group, and she's going to talk about the process of turning plans into effective program implementation. Paulette?
Thank you, Tracy. And, I think you guys in the survey kind of got to the point of what normally causes programs to fail or where we have issues from the beginning. Our attitude here and the work that I've done, where I see the best practices, you start strong. The kickoff and communication piece, I think we tend to minimize it, right? We celebrate, yes, we've got the grant. And we think about how many people and very often how many jobs are going to be saved because we either lost funding and now we're going to bring folks in and we have this new initiative and we're excited. But we have to think about it from setting expectations early on so that the downstream issues that Felicia talked about and what Elizabeth will talk about, you can prevent those, right? But it depends on how you start. Very often we'll hold a kickoff meeting, but all the right partners are not at the table. And when I say the right people, I mean procurement, human resources, your partners. If you need IT, all of the key individuals that will be required to effectively move that grant forward and ensure its implementation, bringing the fiscal team in. And then thinking about compliance. We tend to think of the people that are going to run the program. not all of the support systems around it, and making compliance a key point in everyone's role. I think the other piece is identifying what the reviewing the goals and deliverables and timelines so that not just the lead agency understands that, but everyone understands why you're pushing them, why you're asking for the things in the way that you're asking it. Defining roles for each group, the compliance group, the fiscal group, the program group, and then ensuring that your sub-grantees are doing the same in their organization. Developing and defining a communication plan. Very often folks say, oh, we just meet every month. But what is the process for sharing information? Where do we house all of our tools or resources or templates? And I'll talk about why those things are important. How do we communicate when something isn't going well? When we are getting a report late, or the same individual or the same group tends to have mistakes in their monthly reports, in their data entry. How do we communicate? We think about that up front. Where do these risks show up in the risks show up in our daily operations? Felicia talked about this, but a big part of what normally happens in this work, from my perspective in doing this on the ground, doing this and monitoring and looking at folks from a technical assistance perspective, there's inconsistency across staff, but that normally is because training hasn't happened. Tools haven't been put in place. We tend to say, this is a great partner, this is a great staff. We'll just tell them about the grant. They've worked with the DOL project before. They should know. That is not a thing. Every grant has very specific requirements, and it doesn't hurt to remind folks what is expected and to put tools in place that make it easier for you to report up or to provide documentation. But if everyone is using similar tools, if everyone is using similar language, then you have a much better opportunity to be able to report effectively. Eligibility determination across staff. Just because I did it last year on 2 projects doesn't mean I was doing it right. And then going back to look at your findings, what common findings did you get? And then if you had a grant before, if it's your first time, that's different. But if it's your second or third grant, you should be looking at all of your findings and bringing that into how you then mitigate for this new opportunity. Delays in reporting and tracking. When you find them on the ground, it's going to happen in the federal space, right? When you get to the feds in your reporting. So addressing those early and resolving issues as fast as possible. The misalignment between budget and services. I could be the greatest program manager. I could be able to recruit, but if I don't understand that I can't buy food with federal dollars, then I buy food. And then I'm told, and you say, that's just the only way I get people here. I've got to give them food. I should know that that is not allowable. I should know who to call. Building a shared understanding will prevent all of the things I just talked about. I'm a big proponent, and I have done this before, putting together training and putting together processes where folks understand this is what's required of this grant. And I'm talking about putting together a checklist, like making it a part of how you run your project. Not after you get a finding, before. What are the grant requirements? What does fiscal, make sure that fiscal understands what they need to do, what program understands, understanding what is your own internal procurement process. Is it 3 bids? Is it 1 bid if it's under $2,500? What is it? Does everyone understand that? Shared service delivery expectations. What are the expectations? What are the limitations? And as Tracy said, does everyone need the same service? And are you able to document service delivery based on the needs of the individual? And then how does that line up with the budget? Data and reporting processes. I cannot stress the importance of creating systems and tools to make that easy. Relying on someone sending you data from their perspective and their format, it's only going to make it inaccurate. Your transfer of information based on the different areas and categories take the time up front, build those systems. And then we talk about common barriers that we all know. I've done this for so many years. I know I'm going to have a hiring delay if I am at a state level agency. I don't care if I'm at a nonprofit. I'm going to have a hiring issue if I don't have people on staff. And then, even if I have people on staff, the question is, are they the right people? And I know we get a grant and we're like, Paulette is so great, Tracy's so great. I need to keep her. She's been here for years. Making sure that people are in the right places, doing the right thing is also important. But hiring delays, thinking about how you address them early. You know that if it takes your agency 3 months at minimum to post a position, to fill the position, and you know that the grant said you have to start in 30 days, think about that prior to. Think about, do we need a temp agency? Do we need to have, if you're a state agency, whatever organization you're working with, what are the potential levers that you can pull to demonstrate to the feds that you have a plan of some sort? Procurement slowdowns. If you know procurement is a hot mess, and that is, I had that in my experience. Okay, what are the limitations? Where do I work with procurement early on to say, these are the things I know I'm going to need to procure. How can I get your help? What are the options? Limited staffing capacity. I do not believe that it is a good practice to say, Ms. Tracy is so good at this, that's her job. Single points of failure when you take the federal funds are not an option. You have to have cross-training, you have to have capacity building, and you have to ensure that the program doesn't stop because one person is not available. That says you don't have the infrastructure. That says you don't understand that the program is bigger than you or one person. Partner coordination issues, communication, and communicating with your partners, not just about when success happens, but creating a space for them to talk to you about problems and challenges and solving them together. And I would tend to say the same thing with the feds. You wait until, if you don't know an answer, if you have a struggle, folks will say, don't tell the feds. I think you tell them and you say, help me solve this. Then they become a part of the solution versus finding you in the dark doing something that you had an issue with, but you didn't talk about. The requirements change so every so often, we know it. You might get a new guidance out. There may be some information that's given by the feds, making sure that it gets to every single person that needs to know it. Just because I'm the lead agency doesn't mean that information stays with me. And if we have a failure, it's not an embarrassment, because if you don't talk about it with the entire team, you can't solve it for the entire team and you can't prevent it. So I'll end here as I started. The kickoff and the communication, as we saw in the survey, is the key. Alignment with your program, fiscal, and compliance. I cannot stress the importance of defining clear roles. And please think about who is going to take the time to double check, whether it's every quarter, and say, are we in compliance? Are we having challenges? How do we remedy it? Get to your risk before the feds get to the risk, to seeing the risk, and being able to remedy those. Even if you find it, begin to address them, begin to correct them. Then you have a story to tell. I identified this, I was able to mitigate this, it stopped on this day. Meet regularly across teams. I cannot stress. People tend to think, oh, we're doing well, we're hitting our numbers. You're hitting your numbers, but are you in compliance? Are those numbers real? Is documentation there? Are you reporting correctly? Is your spending in alignment? Do you have the receipts to all of the great things that you did? Do they match up to allowable cost? And then, I just said aligned budget and program, that's just all part of it. And then tracking performance together. It should not be, I'm going to talk to Paulette about her performance and then this person about how are we doing holistically. So every team member, every partner understands that they are part of a bigger process, not just I'm meeting my goals over here and who cares about this group. Sharing best practices across, those are really, really important. And I can't stress enough that strong systems with clear communication compliant and equals compliant and high performing programs. But it takes managing the program, the project, as a project while the program is running, monitoring yourself, monitoring your sub-recipients. That is not something you do at the end of the time of the year. That is something you do and put a practice in consistently. So I will stop here, but I just want to say one last thing. Very often while we do this work, we are focused on, our hearts are in the right place. We want to make a difference and we want to help folks. That's why we do this. And to continue doing that without the excessive stress is teaching every team member the importance of safeguarding the dollars that come to make that difference. And by doing that, when everyone has shared responsibility, you're going to have effective long-term outcomes. I will pass it back to you, Tracy.
That's awesome, Paulette. I think that I can't agree more with the focus on strong communication at every level across all facets of the program that you're working to implement. That is the fundamental responsibility of that project manager who's working to implement that program. So we've got another poll up here, and we are curious about your assessment about what creates the most risk or uncertainty for your organization. Is it knowing what costs are truly allowable, procurement and purchasing requirements, having complete documentation to support costs, or aligned spending with the approved budget? What kind of gets you caught up the most? What keeps you up at night? All right, let's take a look here at how this is coming along. All right, we got yeah, having complete documentation is in the lead here. We've got a leader. Coming close behind is knowing what the allowable costs are. And then sort of following not too far behind is aligning spending with the approved budget. So last but not least, so we must have folks who have strong procurement knowledge and purchasing requirement understanding. So that's good. That's an important part of understanding the work we're engaged in. We are going to hear a bit more from my friend and colleague, Liz Jankowski, just in a moment here. As we bring her in, I want to just remind us that the industry that we find ourselves working in here is a kind of wonky place, right? Like we have all our acronyms and we have all of the things that are particular to the work that we do. And oftentimes, it is understanding that wonk that makes us stronger and better. So, we start rolling off the tongue of MSGs and, common exits and Tegels and all of the jargon that we have. And for new people, that can feel overwhelming. It's really important when we're doing the project management work that we're doing and when we're working inside of our system that we take a little bit of time to step back and make sure that we are clearly communicating what we mean in language that is accessible, and that we are certain that people understand what we're talking about and know how to take that information and through the role that they are put in place to fulfill, complete the objectives that they have to individually own. The onus is on us as a member of that team to be clear and consistent in how we communicate what the requirements are. And we're going to get a bird's eye view of that now, as Liz shares a bit more about program design to oversight reality. Liz?
Thanks, Tracy. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you sound
My-
great.
Unfortunately, my camera also will not turn on anymore. So, and you know, I took time to make myself look nice, but I guess you all don't get to see me. Um, well, thanks, Felicia and Paulette as well. My background is largely in audit and grant compliance, accounting, cost allocation. So I'm gonna try and stay inside of that wheelhouse there. But I think we can all agree that we have a theme happening here, and that theme is communication and pre-planning. And we're going to carry that theme forward, but we're going to make a shift now to preparation for an audit and the risks that can create those findings. How many of the nonprofits out here feel like you're in permanent audit mode? That's something that we hear all the time, that you're in an endless, never-ending cycle of scrutiny. But it doesn't need to feel like panic and chaos if we're organized about it. One thing we see all the time are organizations that have really strong programs, they have great outcomes, great mission impact. But what are the auditors and the monitors really looking at? It's, can you prove how the money was managed, and did you meet all those legal compliance objectives that are written into that contract? Because findings often come from lack of documentation and the control gaps. So this section isn't about whether your program works, it's about whether your infrastructure supports it. And where we see breakdowns are things like not enough staffing in finance, systems that don't scale, i.e., are your current software systems effective for the level of the work that you're taking on? And honestly, departments just not talking to each other. And when you end up with a great program, but a weak execution on the fiscal and legal compliance side, that's where your problems start. Budget risks are probably one of the most common risk areas that we see. And it starts right at the onset, just like Felicia and Paulette have talked about. Our slide talks about things like fiscal is unaware the award was received, internal setup is incomplete, proposals don't align with the fiscal structure. But let's give an actual scenario that is really common. And I hope no one out there feels personally attacked, because this happens at a lot of different agencies. Your development team receives that proposal and you win the award and everyone's super excited, and you get this letter to incur cost, but nobody takes the time to tell fiscal and nobody takes the time to tell the program directors that that award is received and that it's active. So what happens then? The payroll codes don't get set up in your systems. Staff don't know that they're supposed to charge time. Program teams don't even realize that work should have started. So now you're already behind the 8 ball. When no time is recorded, no expenses hit the grant. And from the funder's perspective, that's going to be a big red flag. Another big issue is budget versus GL misalignment. You've probably seen proposal line items come through like quote unquote supplies. Okay, so that's pretty general. What does supplies actually mean? It could mean participant support. Does it mean off supplies? Is it something else? If your fiscal department doesn't understand the intent of the line item, they probably won't record it correctly. And so now your reporting is off to your funder. And then the biggest one is those staffing assumptions. Budgets are built assuming that we're going to hire and we're going to have capacity. But in the end, positions don't get filled because HR was never looped in that we're going to need to hire for this award that's coming in. And our existing staff are already completely allocated to other programs. This results in payroll not matching actual effort or the funding's intent. And the payroll is your largest expense on pretty much all awards. And that's when the funder starts physically seeing that misalignment come through, which will trigger the possibility for monitoring of your program. Internal controls and allowable costs. And everyone knows this is where I live most of the time. And it's where most auditors are going to live. And I promised everyone around here that I was not going to go ahead and start reciting uniform guidance, citations, and all the legal jargon, because we don't have time for all of that. But everyone knows that I just love it. So hopefully we can get into that at some other point. So all that to say, if it's not documented, it never happened. And I know so many of you have probably already heard that how many times over. But the auditors are always going to be looking for that support. Issues come about because of unsupported cost, missing documentation, weak segregation of duties, and those procurement issues we just keep talking about. So what does that look like in a day-to-day practice? When you make a purchase, can you clearly show how it ties to the award? If it's even just a little bit questionable, it's probably not a clean direct charge. And that's the same with payroll. Does the time actually reflect work performed on the program? And then internal controls. Do you have enough staff to separate the duties of your department? Because if your CFO or your finance director is doing everything with no oversight, that's not going to just be a compliance issue. It's actually a pretty big fraud risk. And procurement. Did you follow the required method for that dollar level? And is it clearly written in your policies and procedures? And even if you did, if you didn't document it, it's still probably going to end up being a finding. This one is big anytime you're passing through federal funds, i.e. you're the prime recipient moving funds to a subrecipient and you have no documented risk assessments, you have limited monitoring, you have missing equal opportunity components. But here's the key point. When you're the recipient of federal funds, you own those funds and the compliance requirements from the beginning to the end. Even if your subrecipient makes that mistake, that finding is going to come back to you. And this is why monitoring your subs is so very important. A few things we commonly see that are creating bigger risks are risk assessments done after the funds are already obligated. Subrecipients are chosen during the proposal stage, but never fully vetted. And there's never been a review of the potential partner's single audit. And that audit is going to tell you so much about an entity's capacity and provide you those red flags that you need to make a proper assessment of their ability to be a partner. Selection really just ends up being more about you trusting that entity than actual documented oversight. And then we layer in those equal opportunity or CRC requirements. How many of you know that you're responsible for your own CRC requirements as well as the legal compliance for those subrecipients that you have? Were you aware that civil rights and equal opportunity regulations are part of your federal award contract? Sorry. Many groups are not, but it's no less of an expectation, and it's important to make our programs as accessible as possible because we are using federal dollars and therefore it's public. The federal monitors are going to be looking for those CRC policies, the training documentation that you are training all of your subrecipients, you're training your employees on CRC policies, and those complaint tracking logs and ADA compliance documentation. And it's really not just about whether you have them or not, but that you can prove that they're all being followed. I'll close with some items that could be cause to trigger a deeper review, kind of like Paulette did and Felicia. Auditors don't test everything equally. As we noted previously, they follow risk signals. Spending before setup, missing documentation, frequent budget changes, weak oversight. Individually, those might not be a really big deal, but together they tell a bigger story. And usually those findings aren't surprises. They end up being patterns that started really early and just weren't addressed through to the point of the actual audit. So from a practical standpoint, the biggest ways to reduce risks are bring fiscal and the rest of your team in early, even at that proposal stage. Make sure your documentation tells that clear story. Build controls that actually work for the staffing levels that you have currently, and actively monitor the subrecipients. If we take these steps right at the front end, a lot of the risk will go away before we ever have findings. And I just want to quickly say at the very end here that, you know, all of the things that I'm talking about, the things that Felicia and Paulette are talking about, they don't just relate to entities doing workforce programs. These are programs for any entity that is receiving federal money. And so those regulations will follow those dollars. So with that, I appreciate the time to talk to everybody, and I'm going to pass it back to Tracy.
Thank you, Liz. I appreciate that. I think that one of the through lines that I've heard from each one of our experts today is the importance of strong communication and systems that are designed to connect together and anticipate where the risk is. And that is more art than science. And it's something that we're all, at various stages of designing within each of our own organizations. I do want to make sure that everybody's aware. The chat is open. If you have a question or a comment or anything you'd like to share with the group, you can plop that into the chat. And Kelly will be monitoring that chat to make sure that that we see your question. So I want to just open it up to folks for that purpose. We're going to kind of move into the question and answer period here. And I've got some notes as I was listening to folks sharing their parts of this story. And I want to start with the relationship between that federal project officer and the new grantee. Felicia, I'm curious if you could share your perspective on some of the best practices that you've seen um, between new grantees and their federal project officer that really helps set them up for success in the implementation and management of their award.
Absolutely, Tracy. That's a great question. Hey, I got my video working. I'm here. Hiya. That's a wonderful question, Tracy. And it's a thoughtful question because the relationship with the federal project officer really does, it has a big impact on shaping the success of your grant. I think that one of the biggest things to understand is that your FPO is a person, right? They're a human, so relationship is important. But they're also not just in that oversight role. I think that a lot of grantees are scared, like if the FPO picks up the phone and calls, it's like, oh, there's that stress. But the truth is, the FPO is actually a partner in your success. So I think that in terms of building that relationship, number one for me would be proactive communication. Make sure that you're talking to them. Do not wait until there's an issue. You want to have the relationship already in case an issue arises, and you just want to have a good relationship with them. So to me, that means share your updates early, flag any challenges or risks that you've identified, and give context. Tell them the story as the story builds out so that if something does become a problem, they already know what's been going on. And not only does that proactive communication help them be aware and help them partner with you, but that's also a really good way to build trust with them. Leading into the second thing that I would say is just transparency. I know it's scary to be like telling your FPO, like you don't want to go tell the government, the feds problems, but again, they're going to be the first point of action to try to help you solve them before it goes anywhere outside of that conversation between the two of you. So if something isn't going as planned, say that. And say that, and also tell them what you're planning to do to address it. Don't just go to them with a problem without a solution, but tell them what you're thinking about, and they can help you build upon that. They don't expect perfection, but they do expect awareness and accountability. And then third, I think consistency, consistent reporting, consistent documentation, consistent follow-up. When you don't do your reporting, someone like me who managed FPOs was going to be all over them about where is this grantee's reporting for this quarter? Where is this? And I'm going to be all over them, asking them to go be all over you. Nobody has time for that, right? So just make those things a priority. Reporting, documentation, follow-up, communication, be consistent. When your FPO sees that you're consistent and that you have systems of doing all of these things, they're going to have more confidence in your program overall, and they're going to be an advocate for you. Lastly, I just want to say, use them as a resource. They have a lot of programs. They're busy. But the thing is, when I was doing oversight, I had about 10 FPOs, and each of them had 35 grants each. Like, it's a huge load for them. But also that means that they see a lot of programs. They know what works, they know what doesn't, they know where the common pitfalls are. So asking them thoughtful questions not only strengthens the relationship that you'll have with them, but they will help you. So the three things: proactive communication, transparency, consistency. And I think that at the end of the day, when you're having a relationship with your FPO, the goal is to make it easier for your FPO to understand your program and feel confident in how it's being managed, and bring them on as an ally. Should something go wrong, they'll be the first ones to fight for you.
Yeah, I think it's really critical to see your FPO as your first champion, and that really gets built from the relationship that you structure with them. If you see them as an adversary from the outset, you're going to be limited in your ability to successfully navigate the changes that inevitably happen over the course of several years, which is, generally how these federal grants are structured. So I think your point about remembering that these are people, they're humans, they know nonsense when they see nonsense, and they're going to respond if you're honest and straightforward with them. That being said, you probably don't want to go into a monitoring session unprepared and with your, I'll say, guard down, right? I mean, you want to walk in understanding this is a formal relationship. When you're in monitoring, that's a formal process. And so I really appreciate the comments that you made. There's a question in the chat here about some of the best practices. And Paulette, I want to bring you into this one. What do you have some specific examples or thoughts about how often you want to bring your subrecipients together, or what that communication pattern should look like from the planning of the grant through the management and closeout? What are some of the things that you've seen that have worked well in terms of bringing people together to ensure the success of the grant?
Great question, because this is such an important area, and it seems like an investment, but I promise you it's an investment that's worth making. In a lot of my work, we had monthly meetings with our grantees, our sub-grantees, and our partners. Bringing our sub-recipients together. In the beginning, we literally provided almost like a grant series of training to bring everyone up to speed, right? And then we were able to say, now we had monitoring, like our own monitoring, internal monitoring. So you're going to monitor yourself, and you're going to come and tell us where you have our challenges, but we are going to do a general monitoring of where we are with all of the different areas and the targets we said we were going to hit. And so in the beginning, you had your regular, grants meeting, and then sub-recipient training. I would say probably for a good 6 weeks, you had different sessions, once a week for a couple hours, so that folks understood, what does documentation look like? We would release the tools. These are the tools. And we would say, how are you feeling about using it? Do you have something similar? Because you also don't want to add work if someone already has that. So the question is, how do I make it easy for me, but not create a burden for them? And being able to have those conversations, I think Elizabeth made a really good point about know who you're putting on the grant before you actually engage and commit to that. So you know that the expectations of reporting and documentation, that organization can handle it. If you partner with someone who has 2 people and you're expecting them to do 10 different things, it's very different. So thinking about that up front. But I think in the beginning, our subrecipient training took place, or quarterly or regular monthly meetings. And then outside of that, I work for an organization that had the capacity, but in many cases, I've seen grant managers do this, where they're going to go to they're going to do their own subrecipient monitoring. Some folks hire people, but if you can't do that, figure out how to do it in the least painful way, but also you see the signals. Someone in fiscal is telling you that these things don't add up. Someone over here is telling you that reporting is always late. So I really believe it's based on how many you have, your capacity, but I would say a conversation with your subrecipients every single month is imperative, because you don't want to wait a full quarter, because then you have 3 months of issues and then you've lost the whole quarter, right? And then you go in, by the time you get to it, you're now 6 months in. So it's just really important. And I know it feels like I don't have, when the government doesn't give me money to hire someone to do this, but they're expecting that you have the infrastructure, right, to be able to manage this. So thinking about your own situation, starting early, assessing upfront who you're partnering with, and making sure that that activity is a part of your meetings, your work, and have the hard conversations early on if you see an issue, and help people to correct it. The same way that Felicia said, the FPO is your partner and can be a resource. Remember, they're able to tell you about best practices. So if you're having an issue, you can actually say to your FPO, hey, do any of your other grantees have this issue? And you can go learn from someone else. Sometimes it's an organization that is in another state. Maybe it's a Goodwill, whoever, right, that you're partnering with. Or you have to think about it from a perspective of, the more I share, the more I evaluate, the more I help address issues, the better outcomes we're going to have holistically. Because as the lead agency, as Elizabeth said, all of the responsibility falls on you for the actions of others. So spend the time, invest the time as often as you possibly can. But I think monthly and in the beginning, set a stage. I actually say, I'm going to spend 3 to 6 weeks of once a week doing some kind of training, and then share all of those activities with your FPO. It may not seem like it's important, that's not a reporting requirement, but sharing the actions that you were taking to share how you're going to be compliant, and letting them know all your prep work is also part of letting them know how responsible you are and how thoughtful you are about your monitoring and compliance.
I think that just nailed it, Paulette. I think really being aggressive in your management while managing the not putting too much burden on the subrecipient. So it's a balancing act. That's one of the things that we've learned here at MS, and we're continuing to work it. Like I said, it's more of an art than it is a science. Our federal grants are all designed as pass-throughs. So we're an intermediary. We pass those dollars through to our member partners who are doing the direct service delivery in their local areas. So when we're standing up those projects, and we've had, several $million worth of projects come through our organization and out to those communities, we begin by preparing our partners through the training process as you just described. And then we develop those tools and those forms, and that all becomes a part of the contract. So the contract that gets signed includes the manual that guides how we are going to deliver this project, so that it's all a part of how we deliver this, from the CEO who signs that, and the federal leadership person who signs for the federal fiscal stuff, all the way down to that person on the ground, case manager who's working with those customers. Everybody along that line needs to understand what their role is in that. One of the things that we've also done is implemented scorecards, so that every month there's no surprises. When we get to the end of a quarter and we have to do our quarterly reporting, we don't want anybody caught off guard. We want you to know what your performance looks like. And so we've built those sorts of tools over time. And those are things that we can make available to the folks who are here and others who are interested in understanding what that looks like. I know that the work that you've done, Paulette, in partnership with a variety of different service types of organizations has given you a lens into how those things work at the ground level as well as at the administrative level. And that's the key here when we're talking about performance management. It isn't just about the feel-good things about how we provided case management to that mom who's struggling to just finish up her last semester in college and get out into the workforce, or that young man who's just returning from incarceration and needs to have that leg up. Those services are oftentimes why we get into this work, but we can't lose sight of all of the fiscal and administrative and reporting requirements that make that feel-good stuff possible. If we don't get the other stuff right, then that frontline work will no longer be a possibility. And I think you just nailed it with what you were just describing as those best practices. So I'm also thinking about Liz, when I'm going to give you a specific example here. So I was having a conversation with a colleague yesterday about eligibility and enrollment. And this is it's a hot button issue for all of us, right? You want to make sure that you're managing your process so that you're not spending money on somebody until you're sure that they're eligible for services. And yet, it can slow your enrollment process if you're waiting on that eligibility determination documentation to be in place before you actually bring somebody in and begin to provide services. So technically, there's nothing that prevents us from serving individuals who don't yet have all of their ducks in a row in terms of eligibility documentation. We can do it. We shouldn't spend any actual money on training or support services, but oftentimes programs will avoid that risk because they don't want to have any disallowed costs. Liz, can you talk through a little bit managing that risk and then creating that balance, like working through that tightrope, and some of the best practices you've seen around how people can sort of walk that fine line to ensure they're getting good enrollments, and that they're documenting what needs to be documented, and that's as close together as possible.
Sure. So, I mean, obviously eligibility has very specific criteria that's going to come through in those contracts that you have. It came as was part of your proposal. It was part of the notice of award. And then, you have to follow, like WIOA, you have a very specific checklist. Not all programs have that. So, sometimes there's that front end case management criteria where you've got to get that person in the door in the first place. You're going to have the marketing that goes with getting them in. You're going to have the time that's put into explaining to them how that program works before you can ever even consider going through the enrollment procedures. There's cost involved in that. And I don't know that that's an issue so much for your FPO, where they're not going to have an issue with you utilizing time to inform a participant of what the expectations are for the program, but they're not going to want to pay for a lot of extraneous services for someone that isn't going to be eligible, right? We have to plan to have capacity for that through that administrative line item, or have a marketing budget line item to cover some of those costs when we're building those initial proposals. It's rough because there's always that overhead expectation where we never are given enough money to do the work that we're supposed to do. So like you said, we have to build in the capacity to keep the doors open, to keep the people coming in the door in order to meet those eligibility criteria.
Yeah. And it really is a balancing act. I think that understanding what is allowable to be expended is a critical part of knowing how to manage the project in front of you. Understanding what those eligibility requirements include, what is the baseline, and what have you set yourself in the proposal that you wrote. I'll share, I mean, we've had experiences where we wrote a proposal and included language about things that we would do as part of eligibility determination that exceeded what was the requirements of that FOA. And then we were held to that because it was a part of the scope of work that was bound by contract. So being mindful of all of that stuff is really important when you're doing this sort of work. So I want to just kind of bring us home, and oh, Paulette, yeah, please join in.
I was just gonna say exactly what you said. Do not add. It sounds great. You want to get extra points. Do not add additional burden and additional criteria that is not specified by the government. And be mindful, the word suggest is just that, suggest. They can suggest anything. If it was a requirement, it's like the police officers. If they ask you, can they search your car? You probably are not required to let them search your car. So the word suggest or highly suggest versus required is also keywords when you're looking at an opportunity to not put yourself in a position, because the moment you commit to it, you're held to it, and it doesn't mean they're going to change the level of effort, the amount of dollars that they give you in order to do that. You've just added a burden that you said you were willing to go further, right? And you change the requirements for eligibility. So being mindful of that is so important. And then thinking about it from the perspective of the word marketing is a great word. They like outreach better. They like your phone number and everything, so that it is not intended to market your organization, but it is intended to have participants reach you. So being very careful about the language that you are seeing in those opportunities. And it's actually okay to really just write to what they're asking you for and talk about how you will meet that in the most unique way versus adding additional requirements to say that, you to think you'll stand out.
Under promise and overperform, right?
100%.
I really like that, Paulette, the saying, the not marketing, use outreach. That is a true statement.
Kelly, I see your hand.
We have one question in the chat, and I'm not sure who might want to answer this, but what differentiates organizations that simply survive a grant from those who truly leverage it for long-term impact for their organizations?
Thanks, Kelly. I was actually going to round us out with that question for the full team. So who wants to go first?
Perfect.
Felicia, looks like you.
One thing that immediately comes to mind, one of the pitfalls in terms of surviving versus thriving, is going back to something that Elizabeth mentioned, but it's partners. When you're writing your grant, you put the partners in on the front end, but sometimes, things happen, things change, but really building partners, not just partners for the grant, but having partners, because you all know that the grant doesn't fund everything, right? So leveraging funds is incredibly important for your success. And it's also going to be incredibly important for the success of you getting the next grant and operating that effectively. So I think that really, really strong partner relationships is a huge one, because that was one of the things that was very weak. And a lot of the time grantees would get awards and they, by the time they get it, it takes a long time. They wouldn't have any of the partners that they submitted in the application. And so it's like this constant cycle and this chase. Building that first and maintaining those relationships, I think, goes a long way.
Yeah, and you said an important word there, leverage. I'll go back to what Paulette said. Leverage is important, and you should integrate that in how you build those relationships, but don't put it in your budget. Unless it requires leverage or match, don't put it in your budget because you just created more work for yourself. So that leverage is critical. But just know that you have it and use it internally. Liz, anything you want to add to the differentiator between surviving and thriving?
I think the differentiator, when I think about differentiators for those that survive versus thrive, I think about the groups that I've worked with that they come into these awards with very little capacity for overseeing them. And if you come into that with a plan, with the expertise behind it, you're going to thrive through that grant because you have the people that understand what the expectations of having that federal award are to begin with. So there's no confusion, there's no panic moments when the auditors show up and they start asking questions like, well, how did you allocate your cost? How did you come up with that administrative rate that you're charging us? Um, these are basic things, but not always basic for groups that are just starting. So I would say that if you're a group that just is beginning and you are getting that first federal award, start thinking about making sure that you have the expertise to understand what those regulatory expectations, all that red tape is going to be as you move through the awards, so that you're prepared for those audits.
I think that's great, Liz. Yeah. Paulette, anything you want to add?
It's funny. I was thinking one of my key mantras when I was in the grant space was all money is not good money. And I think it's important to understand that you are granted dollars to meet the mission and vision of someone else. And then they expect that if you said you were going to do it, they're going to support you, right? By giving you the funds. They have a goal that they want to achieve. And then does that match with your goals? Very often we go after grants, but we have another intent, right? Organizations that thrive understand that I'm going after this grant because it also matches my mission and vision, and I may continue it and sustain it past that. And so when you think about just from initial start, why am I going after this? Is it to fund my staff? Or do I actually is it aligned with my mission? Do I have what Elizabeth said, all the pieces to be able to do it well? And is this something that I would think of sustaining because it aligns with me beyond that period of time? A grant is not granted to you to run your organization. It's granted to you because the government or whoever wants to move forward a specific agenda and a specific goal. So the organizations who understand that all money that comes out is not necessarily for them, and they go after the things that they truly can do well, to me, those are the ones that always thrive.
I think those are all really important points. We have just a few minutes left here, so I want to first let everybody know that Kelly put into the chat the link to our convening, which will be in Northwest Indiana this year. Convenings for us are really relational and highly curated events that immerse you in the practice of workforce development in one of our member communities. And so these events um, are really well received by folks who join us. So I encourage you to take a look, and if you can join us, please do go ahead and register. It's June 2nd through the 4th in Northwest Indiana. So that's in the Gary and Michigan City area. We'll be staying at the Blue Chip Hotel and Casino in Northwest Indiana. We will also be following up today's session, planning for an intensive. One of the things that we know as an industry is that we spend a lot of time on the feel goods, but we don't spend a lot of time on the nuts and bolts about what it takes to make this all happen and the requirements of the compliance and monitoring and building strong internal controls and systems that help us be effective in the the work that we set out to do. So we will be following this up with planning a 2-day, 2-ish day session that will allow us to take a deeper dive into what it means. And we'll share at that session, we'll be able to share some of the tools and some of the tactics and some of the resources that we've each built over the years to help you build your own systems to be more resilient, stronger, and more thriving. So please be on the lookout. If you have specific things you'd like us to cover, please share those out with us so that we can be sure as we're planning that event that we're designing it at the beginning with the end in mind and the things that you most need to take away from that conversation. So with that, I will say thank you for joining us today for this conversation. I want to thank the leaders who shared their experience and knowledge with us. And we look forward to next time that we will have this conversation with you. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.